it's almost as if that human is in an area with less oxygen on the planet. So you are trying to survive with less oxygen in the air around you. The way that the virus functions, right, is that it affects the alveolar tissue of the lungs, right? So it is a respiratory condition. That's why you hear on the news that it's transmitted by, what do you hear? It's transmitted by like stuff in like the fluid of like the lungs, or spit, saliva in the air and stuff like that. So if you think about when someone sneezes, like, and you see, like if it's a sunny day or something, you see all that aerosol in the air, like all of that contains the virus. Okay, so all of that, anything that comes from the respiratory system that is in the air can contain it if you have the virus already. So if it's in your sinuses, your mouth, your trachea, or your lungs, that's where it can be housed. A lot of it from studies I've seen, or from articles really that I've seen, is that it lives in the upper respiratory system, like the trachea and throat area, prior to you even showing symptoms, right? So the virus sits there, and you can be contagious with it, but you don't show signs yet because the body isn't really affected by the virus until it hits the alveolar tissue. So what happens is it's here, it's there, right? And that's fine, it can sit there, it can stay there, and it doesn't affect us, but we can spray it out and we can give it off to other people. But then when it falls into and gets into our lungs, our alveolar tissue, it starts to inflame there. So what ends up happening is, like, if we were to have this bag, and this bag were a lung, right? It ends up, the alveolar tissue is all of the inside of this bag, the lung, that ends up transferring the oxygen and carbon dioxide to our red blood cells, right? So it's kind of like the area of, like, a train comes by, it stops, and that's where everyone gets on and off the train, right? So what ends up happening is that when the virus ends up interacting with that tissue, it inflames it and it's not functional, right? So if you've got this lung here, you are now functioning with like half of the surface area, or half of the volume, right? Yeah. So think about, like, less people being able to board and unboard the train efficiently, right? So what ends up happening with the people that end up having symptoms from this disease is that they end up having a harder time breathing overall, right? So I was thinking last night of, like, it's almost as if that human is in an area with less oxygen on the planet, right? So if we were to be on a separate area of the world or a separate planet, it has less oxygen on it. So you are trying to survive with less oxygen in the air around you, right? So you are actually having less oxygen in your system, which then what ends up happening, the way that the body interprets that, is that the body increases heart rate, right? So as the oxygen gets onto the train, it goes and it brings it around to the rest of the body. But if the body is starving for oxygen and it's realizing it's not getting much each train that comes in, what does it start doing? It starts sending more trains to the area. It starts sending more and more and more trains to the area, faster and faster and faster, and that's the heart rate increase. The heart starts pumping faster to draw more blood there, more red blood cells to get that oxygen and bring it out and bring it around. So it starts speeding up this blood flow process, which is why you see older patients, right, and the more chronic, the chronic illness or underlying conditions. What that really means is that these people, all these chronic illness people, are people that have compromised blood flow situations going on already. Yeah. It's the emphysema people that have a hard time breathing already. It is the congestive heart failure people that already have a hard time breathing and with blood flow. It's the diabetics that have some difficulty with blood flow. It is the high cholesterol people that have difficulty with blood flow. It is all of the people it's the obese people that have difficulty with blood flow, right? So it's the renal failure, right? Renal issues have to do with blood flow as well. So the kidneys or the renal area, right, the heart and the lungs all play off of each other to kind of dictate our speed in which the blood is passing through our body. So lack of oxygen increases the heart rate. More salt or like in a higher heart rate, the kidneys process more of that blood, so they become overworked, and then you end up with renal disease, right, or renal failure. Mm-hmm. So these organs that are essentially blood transporters, right? The kidneys and the lungs transport different things from the blood, from the red blood cells. Those are being overtaxed, and those are the things that are failing that people end up having issues with.
Yeah. I watched a video of a doctor in China, and he was saying that like the mortality rate is so high in China, obviously, because like with men over 65 in China, the fatality and mortality or whatever is roughly 20-ish%.
Yep.
Because there's like so many smokers there.
Yes.
And he was saying that
the women not as much.
No, because they don't smoke.
Exactly.
And he was saying in the U.S., it's not getting talked about, obviously, but the most concerning thing is that 40% of people are obese, and that's a huge problem.
Huge.
Like you're just talking about. I didn't know that it was because the heart rate's just going to go crazy once people get it.
Yep.
But that's...
So it's really, and that's why we had made that previous video about breathing, right? Because breathing efficiency is supremely important right now. So if you're someone that smokes, you have already, by the nature of smoking, destroyed some of that alveolar tissue.
Yeah.
Right? So that means that you already have less of the bag functioning. Then you get the illness, you have less of the bag, and then you're living off of a small portion of your lungs. Right? Mm-hmm. So you end up, even though you have the lung there, it doesn't mean that it's transferring oxygen and that, or getting rid of carbon dioxide and bringing oxygen in. It doesn't. These are bags that are inside of us that are constantly just interacting with air. The good portion of our air that we breathe in right now the oxygen isn't even being taken away from that air until much later. This air sits inside of us for a while, and then it's adding air to that air that's already been in there, and then expelling air that has already been in us for a while. Yeah. It's just flowing in and out. And I mean, it's kind of like this bag just sitting here, right? Like air is coming in and out of this bag just naturally, right? We can kind of influence the speed in which that happens. But I mean, if I blew over the top, some air would come out, but a good portion of the air would still be in there. It's not like we are expelling all of the air out of our lungs and then drawing in brand new air, right? You brought up the point about the obesity. I mean, one of the big issues that America is going to run into, the United States, is that 60% of Americans have at least one chronic illness, and I think 40% have at least two, right? So these chronic illnesses of these blood flow related issues are significantly concerning, right? You see a lot. I mean, China has correct me if I'm wrong, but I think China has a high, like, young population. I think they're relatively young, right? Yeah. They're relatively young, which is good, because the younger you are, and this might have to do with why kids aren't becoming as symptomatic, but the younger you are, the more equipped your immune system is, and the more potent your ability to the better equipped your lungs are, right? Yeah. As we age, our lung tissue has experienced more trauma just by breathing in. I mean, you mow the lawn, you walk around out there, you see the dust everywhere. I mean, that is an experience of me breathing in garbage that's not supposed to be in there. So there is micro trauma that takes place to our lungs as we age. And because this is a tissue that inflames because this is an issue that inflames lung tissue, then I think you're seeing a lot of that impacting the older population and obviously the other underlying concerns. One of the reasons, and this is just my hypothesis, but one of the reasons I feel Italy blew up so much is because they are an area that was built off of the public transportation system, right? So like if you ever have been over to Italy, I went over there once when I was in college. I mean, it may have just been the areas that I was staying, but it is all public transportation, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone is utilizing the bus. Everyone is utilizing the trains. I mean, they built their region off of public transportation over personal transportation, unlike us, right? So we have been developed off of personal transportation. We really developed our country off of like the horse and buggy and then the private automobile. What's going to end up happening is similar to what a vaccine does, is that a vaccine makes a portion of the population unable to contract the disease and become carriers and give it to other people. So if you're thinking of the virus in that upper respiratory tract that we're talking about, the people that have the vaccine are not going to be able to spread it to other people. Yeah. So then the R naught decreases, right? Because if I have it and then you have it, then we go home and we spread it to 2 more people, and they spread it, and they spread it, is a much different situation than if I have it, you can't get it.
Yes,
and then I'm only spreading it to people. You are not exponentially growing or spreading this process. So that's where the vaccine comes in. Now what's going to end up happening is that people are going to end up getting this. They're going to end up surviving. And then the number of positives are going to decrease because we aren't sharing it. We aren't capable of sharing it exponentially anymore. At some point, we may be sitting here, you may have already had it, right? I might be with it. I'm still spreading it, but since you already have it, you're not spreading it anymore, right? So you have essentially inoculated yourself because you've already processed it and you've already been with it and you've already experienced it. What ends up happening with the virus is that you end up encountering it, and if your immune system is in a good place, right, if you're healthy, if you are a perfect immune system, it's able to fight it and it's able to ensure that it doesn't end up becoming symptomatic. But then if you end up encountering it again 5 years from now and you're in a state of stress, maybe you just got maybe you lost a loved one, or maybe you are underslept, maybe you're having a real difficult time in school or something. It's possible for your immune system to be diminished enough that finally you end up experiencing the symptoms of it, right? Yeah. So a lot of these viruses are around us at all times. We just don't become symptomatic because our immune systems are very strong or capable. I mean, there are plenty of patients that come in that I primarily see it with like shingles, right? It's a herpes virus, right? And you can be never showing signs of chickenpox, herpes, or shingles. When patients rupture a disc and they come in and I'm treating them for sciatica, they end up presenting with shingles.
Really?
Yep, they'll get shingles down the sciatic nerve. It will travel down the leg. They'll be confused as to why they have a rash down the leg, and they will actually present with shingles because the immune system is so focused on this big injury that took place, that ruptured disc in there, that it's incapable at the moment of combating other types of ailments that the body ends up encountering. So it focuses, and that's why disc ruptures are such a big injury for the body. And then that happens, and then they end up experiencing something that's extremely common, like shingles or chickenpox or something like that. So that's what happens with these people, is that they may be in a good state, they may end up interacting with it, not become symptomatic, and then all of a sudden everyone gets healthy again, and then a year later, these people are a little more stressed, and their immune system isn't as capable, it's still around us, so they become symptomatic, and it gives this appearance as it's back.
Yeah, it makes sense.
The temperatures should not impact the disease.
Yeah.
I feel, in the way that viruses function, I feel that a lot of temperature type of stuff has to do with more of the environmental circumstances than anything else, right? So we think of a lot of diseases, kids are really big carriers of it, right? During the summer, it's warmer out, but yet the kids are also not in school. right? So the kids aren't in school, they're not interacting with each other,
That's true.
right? We are working together all the time, for the most part. During the summer, teachers aren't working as much.
Yeah, true.
People aren't working as much, they're on vacation. We are, in the winter, we are confined to households, indoor locations. During the summer, we are outside more of a percentage of the day than not. I mean, you look at one of the reasons why cruise ships are so much of a problem with these things is because they filter air throughout the entire cruise ship. So if you're in a room in the inner cabin, right, they're just taking your air and pumping it over to the other people, right, and it's just circulating.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, to a different, like a smaller degree, that's what's happening inside of our households, right? Like, so this air is just constantly kind of being filtered throughout the, I mean, with hot air or stuff like that, I mean, it's being filtered in, the windows aren't open, right?
Yeah.
When during the summer more windows are open, there's more air filtration that's happening. I mean, even though you're bringing air in from the outside with heat or AC or something, it's still not as abundant of a shift of air as if the windows were open.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of the heat or cool situations and that it will go away and things like that, I personally feel, and I haven't done that much, like I haven't looked into more like epidemiologists of how the heat and stuff like that. I mean, I think that a lot of this stuff is extremely heat resistant.
Yeah.
But I feel that based off of the way that a virus in the body and our environment functions, I mean, there seems to be more openness during the warmer areas, right, than not.
Yeah.
One of the things that, I mean, in terms of it disappearing, the viruses that end up hopping species, they are built to live in a particular species, and them hopping the species is an accident.
Yeah.
It doesn't really want to hop species. A virus needs a host, and it stays in the host, and it likes the host, and it makes sure it doesn't kill the host, right? Because it wants to survive. So if a virus is in a pig and hops over to us, that's a mistake. It shouldn't, and that's why it is so drastic, because it's a new thing for us. We're experiencing it for the first time, and a virus isn't trying to survive in us. It's just here by happenstance, right? It didn't mean to get to us, so it's causing issues. So I see some things about like, oh, well, a virus wants to survive, so it shouldn't kill the host. Well, when a hops species, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't care anymore. Like it wasn't coming to us thinking it's going to be in a human. It's wanting to live in a pig. So when it disappears or when it's not there anymore, I'm not sure because I didn't see what you saw, but I would assume that it's probably still in the pig, in that virus, that mutation of the virus that hopped over to us, yeah, it's gone because it never really wanted to be in us in the first place. I mean, all in all, we just got to make sure that, like we had said in the middle there, that if your immune system is functioning as optimally as possible, you should be in pretty good shape. If you are a relatively healthy person, that's why, I mean, I'm pumped that we established this Pillars of Health and the Newman Experience section, because it has a lot of valuable information that people can go to now. Like if you are obese, if you have chronic issues, right, you should be reading those articles, watching our videos, making sure that you are trying to be as healthy as possible, because that type of guidance, that type of information it's not too late for you to drop some weight or increase your cardiovascular health.